Hello everybody, today we are talking about artifact weapons. If you don't know what an artifact weapon is, it is a unique weapon that can have up to 5 extra enchantments on it, so 5 blue lines, and a unique is the yellow variant of an item, by the way. It's after legendary, after your purples. They're very good items. And then on top of that, they have an extra special stat that is unique to that item itself. And these are basically the item you want if you are an advanced player of this game. You try and get at least one of these in a wipe so you can go run it with a super good kit. These can basically be as much of a strength add as an entire kit can be. That's how strong they are with just their little extra enchantment. So that said, let's get into it. And I'm going to get into where these drop and what these are today. So first things first, Kuma's Claw, which is an arming sword, has, of course, up to 5 extra enchantments, physical damage of 37 or 38, and it has 15 additional dark magical damage, and that has 100% scaling. Now what the scaling here means is it can do extra magic damage with your gear. So rather than you going and buying some true physical gear here, you would end up buying true magical gear because it would be way cheaper, especially if you're on a melee class that generally wouldn't use true magical damage. I mean, like, how much is a helmet gonna cost with true magical damage? And yeah, so you would go ahead and buy that true magic then. That's just cheaper and it does the exact same thing then. Also, yes, back in the day when magical damage and physical damage could roll on the same item, this was extremely OP. Next up, we got Kuma's Fang, which is a falchion. The base damage of this weapon is 46 to 47, and then it also has 15 additional dark magical damage, and once again with 100% scaling. Now, here's the thing with this one. Kuma's Fang is on a couple more classes, like for instance, you can use it on Warlock, and yeah, there are ways to make dark magical damage scale with Warlock. There's a lot of ways to make damage scale with Warlock, so this one is actually extremely highly sought after, and you'll see it's very expensive. Next up, we got Fulgor, which is a long sword, and if you hit an enemy with this one, it summons a Thunderbolt to deal 20 additional magic damage, and once again, it has 100% scaling. Now, a lot of people really like this one because the longsword is very popular, but it isn't generally as expensive as Kuma's Fang is or Kuma's Claw is, and frankly, that's just because it isn't as good as those two are. The longsword has a little bit longer attack animation with it, and yet it has 20 added magic damage, so it is very good, but each of these have 15 added magic damage, and so they scale a little bit harder, a little faster. So generally, those two are a little bit stronger. That does not make Fulgor bad, by the way. Fulgor is very, very strong. And then next up, we got Viola. Now, before I go on to Viola, the last 3 are all dropped by Skeleton Warlord as their main boss. Just so you know, they are dropped by Skeleton Warlord. Now, right now, on the probability of each of these weapons dropping from the High Roller Crypts bosses, it is a 1% chance, but it rolls 3 times. And then the same thing goes for the Frost Wyvern drops. It rolls 3 times, but on each of those, it's a 2% chance. Now, here's the thing, guys. That does not mean, okay, 1% times 3 equals 3%. That is not how math works. Say, for instance, with the Lich. Now, it depends on how many drops they have, of course, and there's a little bit of some complication in here, but it's actually a 2.9% chance. And the reason for that is because there is an absolutely minute chance that you get 2 at once or 3 at once. So that's technically taking away from some of the percent off of the other ones for you to get it. So it might be a 2.9% chance for you to get an artifact, and then you have a 0.1% chance to get 2 artifacts, or even less than that for 3 artifacts. So let's real quick go into Viola. So Viola is a highly sought after one because it is a rapier, a unique rapier, and rapiers attack very quickly. And when hitting an enemy, it deals an extra 10 magic damage with 100% scaling and frostbites them for 2 seconds. So first off, magic scaling is already good on Rogue because you can use it with like poison weapon, for instance, and it will scale. So you're getting double scaling here or triple scaling here, which is very good. And then the Frostbite here slows down their action speed by 20%, and I believe it also slows down their move speed by 20%. So that just makes Viola extremely good for running players down and making certain they can't escape. And it's just overall extremely good. Might not do as much damage as something like Kuma's Fang or Kuma's Claw, but because you can already use it on a rogue, like a bard, a ranger, things that can get up close on people, that makes it extremely good. And the Viola is dropped by the Frost Wyvern, by the way, so that also makes it extra expensive. Now, I expect any of the ones that are dropped by Frost Wyvern to actually come down in price significantly soon, and that's because Frost Wyvern is now soloable as Warlock, as they made the boss unlockable as a solo player. You don't need 4 people anymore. It's very, very hard to do still, but I think that will still significantly lower the price. Might not cut it in half or anything like that, but maybe 10, 20, or 30%. And I've seen Violas go for about 200k. They're expensive. Next up, we got Deathbloom. Now, this one's kind of interesting. Deathbloom is a stiletto dagger, which are very, very good right now. And after you hit a target 3 times, it causes a flower to bloom. And that Death Blossom explodes, dealing 30 bonus magic damage. So if you hit a 3-hit combo, then they're going to take an additional 30 magic damage. And this does not have scaling, by the way, which is kind of sad, but it is an incredibly good item, and really, just generally, if you hit someone 3 times, they're gonna die, especially if you're in a good kit. Maybe not if it's like a PDR fighter or something and you don't have armor pen, but chances are they're gonna die. This drops by Ghost King, by the way, and so it's not as expensive as the other stuff, but Deathbloom is super high demand. And so, yeah, this one comes out to be very expensive still. Next up, we got some maces. First off, let's talk about the Stinky Stick. So right here at the bottom, this is actually wrong. I'm pulling these off of the wiki, and this got changed just the other day. The Stinky Stick got buffed. So I'm gonna pull up its buffed stats. This is a quarterstaff, and basically turns you into like a zombie, right? I mean, it allows you to spawn the poison clouds. So the poison cloud damage now does 15 damage, so that's actually quite a lot. And the poison cloud lasts for 12 seconds, and it can generate up to 3 clouds at once. And Stinky Stick's poison cloud creation chance is now 25%, and its poison does not scale anymore. On top of this, you can just run through poison clouds, and from what I understand, you can run through like zombie poison clouds while this thing is out as well. So Stinky Stick is a lot better now. And the reason they buffed this one is this one was worth like 1/4 of all the other artifacts. Frankly, you would be better off buying most legendary weapons than this before. It's a lot better now. It still isn't that good, but it's way better than it used to be. And Stinky Stick is dropped by the Lich, by the way, and so it's both a common one and not really one of the strongest ones, because quarterstaffs in general just aren't a very good weapon right now. And so, yeah, they come out to be quite cheap still. If you're looking to get your first taste of an artifact, a Stinky Stick you can probably get for around 30k right now. Next up, we have Pulverizing Prayer. This is another one of the most expensive ones. So this is a Morning Star, and when you hit an enemy with it, it reduces the enemy's physical damage reduction by flat 25%, up to 3 times, and it lasts for 10 seconds. Now, you might think, wow, that's only really useful against like PDR fighters. No, this game has negative physical damage reduction as well. So if you hit a player with this, they're gonna be hurting, especially if they're like a rogue or something that's a low armor class, as if you didn't already do enough damage to them. The moment you go into the negative, it gets really, really bad with physical damage reduction. On top of that, a lot of enemies already have negative physical damage reduction, and so you can stack this even harder. This makes Pulverizing Prayer the best weapon for killing bosses quickly. So if you're really trying to farm bosses super hard, this is your guy. And what does it drop from? Skeleton Warlord. So because it's high demand and from Skeleton Warlord, which is one of the way harder High Roller Crypts bosses that gets killed way less often, that makes it super expensive. Generally, I seem to see this one going for anywhere between 150 and 250k depending on rolls. Next up, we got Cinder, the Halberd, which when you hit an enemy with it, it deals 10 additional magical damage with 100% scaling and burns them for 9 magic damage, 50% scaling, over 3 seconds. This guy is also super good, and you're seeing there that it has 2 ways it can scale, which makes it really good. So it already has base 19 magic damage, although some of that is over the course of 3 seconds. But then it also has some 50% scaling on there. And so that can go super, super well. I don't know if this would be 3 ticks then, by the way, of magic damage afterwards, just in the fire. But I don't know if it's 50% scaling on each tick of fire, or if it works like Curse of Pain, where it ticks over the entire thing. So let's say you have 6 additional magical damage. Would that be 6 additional magic damage per tick, or 6 additional magic damage over the entire course of it? Of course, it's 50% scaling in the first place, so even if it was like that, it would be an extra 3 damage per tick. And this is just for instance. But this one scales a lot better. Of course, this is a way larger weapon that swings way slower, but Cinder is super good, and it is once again one of the more expensive ones, although it really isn't actually all that high demand. The reason why it's expensive is because it drops from Skeleton Warlord, which, like I said before, that's a very hard boss. So it does not drop nearly as often. Not as many people are killing that boss. Next up, we got axes. And these are some more of the cheap ones. So let's first off start with Echo of Screams. And this one has a fairly large range of physical base weapon damage. So if you're going to buy one, try and check to make certain on that first. Although I'll tell you, the range of price on these things is kind of in the eye of the beholder at a certain point. And sniping deals is worth it just to snipe deals. And so Echo of Screams also deals 20 true magical damage. And that's true magical damage, by the way, so MDR does not actually help you at all against this. It just goes right through. That's a ton of damage, but it has 0% scaling. And it causes the victim to hear their screams, deafening them for 3 seconds. I know it says deafening them, by the way, but I don't think it actually, like, turns their headphones off otherwise or anything like that. It is just a super loud scream. And this one drops from the Ghost King, and so that's partially why it's a bit cheaper. Ghost King really isn't all that hard. Next up, we have Life After Death, which is personally one of my favorite designed unique weapons or artifact weapons. And basically what this one does is when you receive a lethal attack, your HP stays at 1, you're not dead, and you become invincible for 2 seconds. This effect can only be triggered once during an adventure. Now, I think it does reset if you go down into the Inferno. Don't quote me on that. That used to be how it works. They might have fixed that. And I can also tell you there used to be a bug where if you put it away and pulled it back out, that counted as resetting the run. That is definitely not in the game anymore because players were going around with permanent invincibility with this item, and that was very, very bad. And this one drops from Ghost King, by the way, so once again, it's one of the cheaper ones. And because it's a double axe, it's a little bit better than a battle axe is, so it generally ends up being a little bit more expensive than the Echo of Screams would be. Next up, we got the Soulscraper, which each time you deal damage, you absorb an opponent's soul, gaining 5 strength for 8 seconds, and that effect can stack up to 3 times. So strength gives you some extra health, although not very much, and it gives you quite a bit of extra damage. The problem with this is that Barbarian already has quite a bit of strength, and the more strength you stack, the less effective it becomes. And so this one just doesn't do all that much extra compared to the other ones. However, it is a felling axe, and felling axes are already really good. So this one honestly seems to be the favored one to go to out of the big axes. And once again, it drops from Ghost King, so once again, it's one of the cheaper uniques. Next up, we got the tiny little axe, the Horseman's Axe, which is Famine. And when you hit a target with this, it will render them unable to receive any healing effects for 20 seconds. That is a long time, guys. Now, Horseman's Axes are not nearly as good as they used to be. There used to be a bunch of skills. You just had straight up extra damage with axes. And so Horseman's Axes were very good. And if I remember correctly, they didn't used to take as much move speed. So it's not as good as it was back then. Famine actually seems to end up being the second cheapest unique usually, although it still has a lot of power behind it. I mean, think if you hit a Warlock with this, or a Cleric with this, or if you hit, a Druid with this, or any of their teammates. It really can hurt them a ton. The problem is, compare that to one of the other weapons that just causes you to one-shot someone. Well, shoot, doesn't seem as good then, does it? It's still a very good item though. And this one actually drops from the Lich, which makes it beyond cheap. Lich seems to be the one that dies the most. And so next up, let's talk about the bows. Nipalan, which pushes the hit target back. Now, Nipalan is a longbow, and it is an incredibly strong weapon. Now, this doesn't sound like it's actually all that strong, but this is beyond broken, guys, and I need to explain. Basically, this game has a lot of momentum involved, so because you're pushing a player back with this, you basically stall them in place permanently if you hit them over and over. And because the players who end up buying artifact weapons are generally pretty good in the game as well, they don't miss very often. So this weapon is incredibly strong. However, it is from the Frost Wyvern. Now, I have not seen one of these at anything remotely what I would call a reasonable price. Just people really trying to overlist it, and they were trying to sell it for 350k. I don't think they're gonna get 350k for it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that seems like it's a little high on the price. However, though, because it drops from the Frost Wyvern, it is a significantly rarer item. So if you're looking for your first artifact weapon, I wouldn't recommend this one, although it is a very strong item. Next up, we got Pestilence, which is a recurve bow. And with this one, hitting the target inflicts a disease that deals 20 magic damage, 50% scaling over 3 seconds. So yes, once again, extra magic damage will help here. Once again, I don't know because the magic damage is split up into those 3 ticks then. If it gives you 3 extra ticks, so if that would be 150% scaling technically then, or if it's 50% because it only scales over the entire damage amount. I just don't know. There's not much info on it online. If you guys know, leave a comment below. And Pestilence, once again, is dropped by the Frost Wyvern. Not very common, not very achievable for a normal player. It ends up being very expensive. These seem to go for about 200k. Next up, we got the Elven Bow of Truth. And this one is wild. When shooting a bow, the action speed is 10% faster, so you pull the bow back faster, and the arrow flies in a straight line. So the arrow shoots straight forward. You don't have to account for drop or anything like that. Now, that said, the arrows don't drop all that hard in this game in the first place, but it makes it for a completely different arrow trajectory. And it seems to me like that actually causes the arrows to hit faster due to their trajectory being a straight line. They get to their target faster. And so that makes it very good. However, this doesn't have the huge damage the other bows have. And in the past wipes, I've seen this one be worth very little. This used to be the cheapest one. However, survival bows are actually quite good now, whereas in previous wipes, they were kind of just a meme. So I've seen this one going for about 200k once again, and it's just very expensive. I don't know if it's selling for 200k. It's kind of hard to tell with these things. I would definitely go for one with some extra damage on it, though, if you are going to buy one of these. But once again, it drops from the Frost Wyvern, so not very achievable for a normal player because it's very expensive. And next up, we got some shields. First off, let's talk about the Aegis, because this is another one that I think is fantastically designed. This is a heater shield, and it can deflect projectile spells while in the defensive stance. So a fireball or a magic missile, it can deflect. And if I remember correctly, it can deflect things even like lich attacks and things like that. Now, after the reflection is triggered, you remain able to reflect for 3 seconds, but you cannot reflect again for 20 seconds after performing a spell reflection. Now, the problem with this is it doesn't reflect hit scan spells, which I think that would have been immensely hard to code, so that's probably why they didn't do it. So what ends up happening if you fight a wizard is, and they know how this guy works, they just don't cast fireballs at you, if they're smart. Because you'll just reflect it and hit them with it, then they don't like that. Now, this guy drops from the Frost Wyvern. Once again, this guy actually used to be a extremely cheap one, but because it drops from the Frost Wyvern, that makes it super rare, and because you can use it with other named uniques or artifact weapons, it actually is a bit more expensive now than other ones. Now, let's go on to Delirium. This is a buckler, and This is a sad excuse for an artifact, if I'm being honest. When held in hand, maximum health is reduced by 10%, but regenerates 1 health per second, with 0% scaling. Yes, this guy did used to scale. Yeah, it was a little bit broken. I think they fixed that like almost immediately and made it like super low scaling, but now it just doesn't scale at all. And so the reason why this guy is bad, by the way, is because your maximum health being reduced by 10% is quite the trade-off. It's an artifact weapon. Why does it need a trade-off? It's supposed to be OP. People pay like 100k for these. Why not just let it be OP? You could still kill someone with this just fine, with them healing 1 health per second. Now, oftentimes what you would see before they nerfed it to being like this is players using it with Viola or something like that. But I actually find that super fun to have a player in the lobby who is geared like crazy, because what ends up happening every time you have an artifact weapon in the lobby is everyone in the lobby dogpiles them, which makes for, I think, a super fun playtime for those players that are getting dogpiled, because their gear is strong enough that they can just kill everybody. But the players dogpiling them, they also have a pretty good chance at killing them. It's very possible. You're not actually going to make it that many rounds with these items, probably. And this one drops from the Ghost King, by the way, so that's also why it's a bit cheaper. You can see this one oftentimes for about 40k gold recently. And guys, I'm just going to recommend it. Don't buy this one. If you're really wanting a good buckler, buy a legendary one. I know unique items are cool. This one's kind of a waste. It actually ends up hurting you more than it helps you. Buy Troll's Blood as well. You're fine. And next up, we got the magic items. First off, we got the spellbook, which is Spellweaver. So if you successfully cast a spell, it increases your casting speed by 5% up to 5 times, and the effect lasts for 3 seconds and is reset each time it increases. So you have to be rapid spamming spells to get this to be as effective as possible. Curse of Pain is generally the best use case for this, because you can spam it super fast, and spamming it faster makes you deal way more damage. That said, I think it's definitely one of the weaker items, and that's because, frankly, Wizard and Warlock used to be way OP, and I know people don't like Warlock right now. I'm talking, it used to be 100 times worse, guys. But yeah, and this one is, of course, their weapon of choice, the Spellbook, so that's why I think it's a little bit weaker. But frankly, I think this one could use a little bit of a buff. Maybe if it was a bit longer than 3 seconds, the effect blast, if they made it last, say, 10 seconds, then it'd be super fun to play with. Or if it was just, it ups your spellcasting speed by 25%, period. Then it would be super fun to play with. And once again, it's a unique item. It should be OP. Generally, this is one of the cheaper ones, by the way, because it drops from the Lich. That does not mean it is actually like a bad unique, by the way. It is a very strong unique still. It just doesn't give you as much of a boost as the other uniques do. Spellbooks are just a very good weapon in the first place. Next up, we got the Magic Staff, Illusory, which a successful spell cast from this makes the user invisible for 2 seconds and leaves the user's illusion temporarily. So the little thing you got going on with Invis, where it leaves like a little white outline, this does the same thing. So if you use this to cast magic missiles, you will go invisible and be casting magic missiles from where you're invisible, while invisible. This guy is super strong and has a lot of use cases. Sadly, it's a magic staff, which are very weak from the base. If Bonk Wizard was a little bit more viable, it would be a super strong item. But I think this item is great because it's very unique and it has a lot of fun attached to it, which I think is fantastic for an artifact weapon. I think the added 15 magic damage gets pretty boring after a while, whereas this is cool. This, once again, drops from the Lich, so if you're looking for a cheaper artifact weapon, this is probably one to go for. It is a little bit higher sought after than something like a Famine or a Stinky Stick is, but it's a little bit more in the achievable range as far as if you can afford it. And then our final one, the Crystal Ball, Zirkzi's Eye. And what this one does, if the spell hits the target, Death's Gaze deals an additional 2 true magic damage, with 0% scaling, by the way, to the enemy. Now, here's why this is important. So if you hold this crystal ball out, the enemy will receive an extra 2 true magical damage per tick. What this is really good for is a kit that has a lot of ticks of Curse of Pain and Power of Sacrifice. This powers them up to an absurd degree. Now, the problem with this one, of course, is you have to hold the item out. Generally, you do not want to do that with your magical item. You want to hit the enemy with it and then run away immediately with your item sheath as they keep taking damage. But with this one, you want to hold the item out, so that gets a little bit annoying. However, the damage is absurd from this one. You can deal so much extra damage with this one and from range, and it's really good for warlocks specifically. So yeah, this ends up being a very strong one. However, this guy is actually fairly cheap from what I've seen. It's not the most sought after item ever, although it's very good on Warlock, and it also drops from the Lich, so that makes it common enough that it is cheap. Now, there's a couple more things I need to talk about. First off, these items don't only drop from bosses, they also drop from the Skull Key room. There's a 7.5% chance for a weapon to be sitting on the table in the back that is an artifact weapon. And then on top of that, the Golden Key room has a 1% chance to drop an artifact. I don't know how this one works, like where it is, if so. And by the way, you will never make your money back from using a bunch of golden keys. If you used 100 of them and it cost you, say, 700k, then you're not making your money back on opening them. They have greatly exceeded their actual value in the game. Now, also, treasure hoards used to have a chance of dropping an artifact. They have a chance of dropping golden coin chests, which are worth as much as many artifacts, or even more than the cheaper artifacts, but they do not have a chance to drop an artifact anymore. The Mystic Gem room does not drop artifacts anymore. The dual boss treasure room, the one in High Roller even, for killing the Cyclops and the Cave Troll, does not have any chance to drop artifacts anymore. It used to actually be super common from there, and it was a problem. It has a 0% chance now. I kind of wish they'd add it back in as like a 0.1% chance, but it's not a thing. And then the Inferno bosses have a chance to drop them, as I said before, say a 1% chance, and then it would roll 3 times. The Wyvern has a 2% chance and rolls it 3 times. And this is not accounting for all of the other uniques, by the way. The artifacts are a separate chance on the table. So the other uniques have a completely different roll they go for. This is not going to hurt them. And then there is also the Ice Key room. It has the same chance as the Skull Key room with 7.5% chance. But Ice Keys are so rare and absurdly expensive, I don't know why you would possibly do that once again. So basically, though, you get these items by killing the bosses. That's where these are all coming in the game, for real. Now, how you can also afford these items is, say you get a Skull Key drop from, you can find it on the Throne Room, you can find it from killing the bosses. Even in normals, the bosses have a chance for a Skull Key, by the way. You can go ahead and you can just farm for a really long time. If you do like my Inferno farming method, you'll find a bunch of these anyways, but you'll also just get rich enough to buy these. I have a Soulscraper and a Skull Key just sitting in my stash, and frankly, I'll use them at some point, but not anytime soon. Oh yeah, and then one more thing. 2 artifacts. Sometimes we have had artifacts introduced into the game mid-game. So let's say they were adding Illusory into the game, right? The artifact Magic Staff, but that wasn't an artifact before. That would make it so that all unique items of that type, so let's say magic staffs that were just normal uniques before, would turn into that artifact. And so people were wondering when that happened how people got the artifact so fast. The answer is they didn't just drop for them, they had them before. So this is also a strategy. You might see that unique weapons go for like an absurd amount even if they're not artifacts. Sometimes people will buy them to try and get ahead on this before they add them to the game. Now, guys, I'm gonna give you guys like a super big trick here for what you can do in order to find weapons that will be artifacts before they're artifacts. There are YouTube channels that do leaks. Basically what they do is they data mine the game for updates before they happen. So they might data mine the test servers or something along those lines, and they will find a new texture. For instance, this was the case with the Zirkzi's eye. That texture was in the game for a long time. You could tell an artifact was coming. So if you see that in one of those videos that there's suddenly a new texture in the game, it's going to be a way higher chance that that item gets turned into an artifact that wipe than any other item. The art is already there for it. So if you guys decide to engage in that, get ahead of other people and then watch those videos if you're trying to snipe what items will turn into artifacts and figure out which ones have skins in the game already. By the way, I generally wouldn't recommend doing that because they end up being so expensive that you'd be better off just buying an artifact in the game already if you want to use them. But if you just want to be the first person with a cool new unique artifact just to test it out, maybe you have enough money to spare, go for it. That is an extra trick. Anyways though, guys, I hope this video is helpful. Let me know if you liked it and leave a comment below. And then also, guys, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. It means a lot to me. Alrighty, bye-bye.